Next on Currents News, they made it this far, but there's no end in sight. New orders could cause small businesses in New York City to finally shut their doors for good.
Businesses are being told, comply or you won't survive. I'm Jessica Easthope with how one Bay Ridge restaurant is doing its best to keep up with the city's ever-changing rules.
Despite high hopes, high temps would stop the spread, summer weather isn't saving us. So what will? We're taking another look with the experts. The Supreme Court intervened in the dead of night. Now a man is dead. What Catholics are saying about the execution. Investigations continue tonight into the fire that destroyed one of St. Serra's California missions. Could it be arson?
I think it's a miracle that the altar was still standing.
New reports say 1 ton of lead ended up on the ground after Notre Dame's fire. Where else did it end up? Only time will tell. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Emily Druby. Small businesses are the backbone of the Big Apple's economy. Right now, owners in the city are facing a tough time. They're trapped in a maze of pandemic rules that seem to be changing all the time. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story of a restaurant struggle in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn.
It's just unfair that they're putting so much pressure on all the restaurants.
Maria Pranzo is the manager of Gino's on 5th Avenue in Bay Ridge. The Italian restaurant has been open for 56 years. It's her family's business.
It's always been an uncertain business, and now it's even more uncertain than ever. Every day it's like you're running a new business.
Maria helps run the restaurant with her brother Anthony, but since the pandemic, it's a far cry from what it used to be. On average, before COVID-19, the restaurant served more than 600 people a day.
Now, how many? We're lucky if we can get 150 in. We're probably at like a fifth of our business.
Like many other restaurants across the city, Gino's built an outdoor dining space in front of the restaurant in compliance with the city's guidelines.
They gave us 24 hours to get that done.
Or so they thought.
And on Sunday, somebody came and told us that we needed to have an 18-inch between the street and the seating.
They hoped the space would be a blessing. But with the city's ever-changing regulations, it's been more like a curse.
For them to change the guidelines after the game started, it's not fair. We got it done, but a lot of places are not going to get it done.
The UN estimates businesses like Gino's with less than 250 workers make up 2/3 of employment worldwide. Maria says she's desperate to get her employees back to work.
We were prepared to bring back more people when we were supposed to do the 50% indoor. And now, I had to tell these people, no, you can't come back.
Maria and her family's faith has kept hope alive. She says despite their struggles, she feels God is on her side.
Yesterday was supposed to rain all night, and I was just like, please, dear God, just let it hold out. And you know what? The rain did hold out. So I kind of feel like I do rely on my faith.
For now, Gino's is in complete compliance with the city's guidelines. Maria says she's hoping the rules don't change anymore and businesses can get back to serving the community. In Bay Ridge, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The COVID pandemic is being blamed by Mayor Bill de Blasio for the violent wave of shootings gripping the Big Apple. At least 17 people were shot in the city on Monday. Brooklyn saw the most violence with 10 shootings and 12 victims. So far in 2020, there have been more than 600 shootings, almost double from a year ago. De Blasio is claiming the surge is linked to coronavirus disruptions to the economy and the court system. Coronavirus cases are still on the rise, with Florida, Texas, and California reporting at least 30,000 new cases on Monday alone. The surge prompting another round of closures in the Golden State's hardest hit counties. But months ago, there was talk that the virus would die down in the summer heat. Well, that never happened. Infection rates are spiking in some of the hottest states in the country, even though early indicators suggested that heat and humidity would slow the virus. But in recent weeks, the opposite has happened. Experts are now predicting the weather won't have any substantial impact.
It's not that weather is actually going to affect the virus itself. Even if the virus was weakened in the heat and the humidity of the outdoor environment, most of the transmission is expected to be indoors.
That's because sunlight can reduce the transmission of COVID-19, according to climate experts like William Niter, but not enough to curtail the growing numbers. Factors like population density and social distancing have a much larger effect on how the virus spreads, as do masks.
Common sense, you don't want to enter into close proximity with people, with anybody, without your mask.
But lax adherence to the rules could be one of the reasons for the surge in cases. Even so, the death rate is going down or holding steady in many states because of more testing, an uptick in younger people getting infected who have better odds at survival, and aggressive treatment strategies that are saving lives.
We know better how to treat COVID now. We have a couple of medicines. In addition to the remdesivir and the dexamethasone, we have Serra from recovered patients that, although it's not effective late in the disease, it's actually beneficial early.
Infectious disease expert with Catholic Medical Association, Dr. Robert Tabali, says the virus may even be weakening, but that we can't let our guard down because the next few weeks will be telling.
It's usually in the later phase, after 2 to 3 weeks, that patients actually enter the most dangerous phase where they could lose their life. So actually, we're kind of coming up on that now.
The hunt for a vaccine is racing forward. A leading candidate is set to start late-stage human trials in less than 2 weeks. International college students taking online courses in the U.S. during the pandemic won't be forced out of the country. The White House is dumping a new rule that would have stripped the students of their visas if they're not attending school in a classroom. The move settles a lawsuit against the Trump administration brought by Harvard and MIT. A coalition of Catholic universities had voiced strong backing for the students. The first federal execution in 17 years is sparking strong disapproval from Sister Helen Prejean, a leading Catholic advocate for the abolition of the death penalty. She said this morning, "I'm appalled to hear that the federal government executed Daniel Lee early this morning after the U.S. Supreme Court issued a seemingly unprecedented opinion at 2 a.m. While we were all sleeping, the government killed a man under the cloak of darkness." 47-year-old Lee died from a lethal injection at a federal prison in Indiana hours after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. Lee's role in the 1996 murder of a family of 3 led to his execution, the first of a federal inmate in more than 17 years. 2 years ago, Pope Francis ordered the Catholic Catechism changed to state that the death penalty is inadmissible under any circumstances. The investigation into the fire that badly damaged the historic St. Gabriel Church has determined where the blaze started, but not how. The blaze broke out Saturday in the choir loft of the nearly 250-year-old mission founded by St. Junipero Serra just outside of Los Angeles. The cause of the fire is still being probed by the local arson task force and the feds from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Parishioners are showing their support for the beloved house of worship.
I just wanted to be closer, and I just wanted to hear the homily, and then I just wanted to feel like we were family because we're all hurting.
It makes me sad because it's such an old building, and as I remember, everything in it was wood.
I think it's a miracle that the altar was still standing.
Church officials are vowing to rebuild the mission, and the Archdiocese of Los Angeles has started a restoration fund. The fire that ravaged Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris also spewed more toxic lead into the air than first believed. When the landmark church went up in flames over a year ago, more than 400 tons of lead on the roof melted. French officials said at the time the smoke wasn't a health threat. Now, a new investigation is showing the contamination was far worse, with lead falling on the streets around the cathedral and on homes up to half a mile away. Still ahead on Currents News, online only or in person, can schools safely reopen? That's the question heard around the world. Coming up, what teachers think. And a new leader to shepherd young priest hopefuls in New York City. He's facing the same types of issues, but thinks God will prevail. If you haven't met Auxiliary Bishop James Massa, now's your chance. He was America's first black Catholic priest, and he could be the country's first black saint. How Catholics are honoring Augustus Tolton.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
It's one of the hottest debates growing out of the COVID crisis, the best and safest way to reopen schools. New infections are up in almost 36 states. Despite the increase, many areas are moving forward with plans to get kids back in school. And that's not sitting well with some teachers. Nadia Romero has the story.
In South Florida, teachers like Serra are uniting to fight a state order to reopen all schools in the fall.
For the first time in my 17-year career, I'm scared.
The Sunshine State is breaking records with more than 27,000 new cases in the last 2 days. President Trump's administration says the decision to reopen schools should be done on the local level. The president calls the CDC guidelines too tough and too expensive.
And the reason they're expensive is that you actually have to make physical changes to the school to make it safer.
A former acting director for the CDC says because schools are funded by property taxes, reopening now could put poorer communities at risk.
It means that wealthy communities may be able to make the changes so that schools are safe for their kids. Lower income communities are not going to be able to do so. So the same disparities we've seen play out in terms of who's dying from this pandemic, with more Black and Latino and Native American kids getting, adults getting hit hard. You're going to see it play out with schools.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says the decision should be made outside of politics.
We can't turn schools into yet another political football in this game. It's not fair on our children.
A situation that is all too real for Voss.
I'm scared for my own safety and for my children's safety. And to just take a risk like this seems foolish to me.
In Washington, Nadia Romero, Currents News.
3 of the nation's largest school districts will begin the new academic year with all kids learning from home. Schools in Los Angeles, San Diego, and Atlanta will start out the year entirely online. The COVID infection rates are surging in California and Georgia. At the same time, the White House is pressuring schools to open their doors in the fall. Some are planning 5-day-a-week class time. Others, like New York City, are looking at a hybrid of in-school and home learning. Governor Andrew Cuomo is saying the data will guide his decision about opening schools in the state.
If you have the virus under control, reopen. If you don't have the virus under control, then you can't reopen, right? We're not going to use our children as the litmus test, and we're not going to put our children in a place where their health is endangered.
Cuomo is laying out a formula to reopen schools across the state. A region has to be in phase 4 of restrictions. New York City is in phase 3, and the daily infection rate must remain below 5%. Decisions on reopening schools will be made in the first week of August. The famous Catholic seminary at Dunwoody in Yonkers is about to have a new rector. Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop James Massa, he joins us now. Bishop, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Emily. Good to be with you.
Now, the leaders of the Brooklyn Diocese, the New York Archdiocese, and the Diocese of Rockville Center chose you to be the rector at St. Joseph's Seminary. Why do you think you were selected?
Well, I'm deeply honored to be invited to take on this role. I had been on the faculty of the seminary, and back in 2011, Cardinal Dolan of New York, Bishop Murphy, then of Rockville Center, and Bishop DiMarzio asked me to coordinate the merger of the programs at Dunwoody with those at the seminary in Huntington. So I was involved in that, and I had, a prior experience being on seminary faculties elsewhere too. So it's been a rich part of my life as a priest, and I love the work, and it's truly an honor to help prepare young men for the priesthood, but also permanent deacon candidates and lay women and men in the ministries that they will take on.
So it sounds like you have a lot of experience. What do you think is going to be your biggest challenge when you assume this new role?
I think that, the biggest challenge is helping the seminarians figure out how do we minister in the world today, in our American society, which very often is in tension with what the church holds to be important and valuable, namely our relationship with God and Christ. It's helping them negotiate also, their role in a church that is increasingly diverse and multicultural. They need certain competencies to be able to relate to the very different communities that make up our parishes in this part of the country. So I would name those two, both the challenges of secular society and the diverse character of the church as the two principal challenges.
Sounds like you have a lot to take on. Now, you're also going to be taking on getting the school open in the midst of the COVID pandemic. What's going to happen at St. Joseph's?
Yeah, well, that's an evolving reality as it is for schools at all levels of education at this time of the summer. But it looks as if the seminarians will once again reside at the seminary. We will practice social distancing, masks will be worn in public spaces, etc. But for our permanent deacon candidates and for our lay women and men in the master's program in theology, they will study remotely.
Now, a big question for the Catholic Church, how to best boost vocations to the priesthood. Really quickly for me, can you tell me how you hope to increase vocations?
I always remember that question being posed to Cardinal Dolan when he became Archbishop of New York in 2009. And he answered by saying, smiling a lot, by really joy. Joy is what attracts people to service. And there's just tremendous joy in serving God and his people in the church. And I think the men who are responding to the call of Jesus to serve as priests have to project the joy of the gospel, to use an expression of Pope Francis.
Bishop James Massa, the new rector of St. Joseph's Seminary in Dunwoody, thank you so much for being here and good luck in your new role.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Pray for me.
America's first black priest, Father Augustus Tolton, was honored with a mile-long pilgrimage in Illinois. About 150 Catholics took part in the journey on the 123rd anniversary of his death, arriving at his gravesite in Quincy to pray. Those in the pilgrimage spoke of the inspiration they find in Father Tolton's ministry.
He wasn't afraid of the persecutions or the racisms or the other things happening in his time. He knew where he was heading. He knew where his hope lies, in heaven.
The fact he'd been a slave and became a Catholic priest and was the first, black African priest in the United States.
Now Father Tolton is on the path to become the first African-American saint. Pope Francis declared him venerable a year ago. The Pittsburgh parish that we've been telling you about is now dedicated as a personal parish for Black Catholics. A Mass at St. Benedict the Moor Church was celebrated by Pittsburgh Bishop David Zubik. He spoke of the importance of the parish.
It's imperative that diversity is appreciated within the context of this community, and that diversity can help this parish and this entire diocese become more who we're called to be, the body of Christ. And finally, I heard your message. It's time that your gifts, your talents, all that you bring to the church, to this local church, can in fact be shared as leadership with the entire Church of Pittsburgh. And to that, I am most committed.
Bishop Zubik decided on the personal parish after listening to suggestions from Pittsburgh Catholics. Still to come on Currents News, Williamsburg's finest feast. It doesn't look like this year, but the show still went on, and there's more to come. You don't have to miss out on the fun. Plus, the sounds of 300 musicians. They're out of work, but not out of tune, coming together to support the Black community. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. A historic first for a long-standing Brooklyn Catholic tradition. It was virtual Glio Sunday at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church in Williamsburg. Because of the pandemic, the beloved Glio lift couldn't happen this year. Instead, more than 60,000 people watched the virtual celebration streamed live on the parish's Facebook page. On Thursday, Our Lady of Mount Carmel will have Mass and a procession led by Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio to mark her feast day. That too will be on Facebook. It starts at noon on Thursday, July 16th. With Mass, followed by the neighborhood procession. You can see it all at facebook.com/OLMCChurchBK. And finally tonight, musicians who can't perform on stage right now because of the pandemic are still pooling their talents together. They've produced a new song called Rebuild. As Melissa Butts reports, Rebuild is for 2 special audiences.
Countless musicians worldwide whose livelihoods often rely heavily on live gigs have been devastated by social distancing and the economic crisis set in motion by the coronavirus pandemic. That's why Shelby Razzler, a musician from Berklee College of Music, took to the recording studio to help them.
It's a brand new song called Rebuild, and I wrote the music for it, and my sister Brielle wrote the lyrics, and there are almost 300 people across the world who are part of this project.
While Rebuild was originally inspired by the difficulties resulting from the coronavirus, Shelby explains it's also a way to show support to the Black community.
Waiting in the cold as days turn to weeks, waiting to behold what the other.
Unfortunately, as we all can see right now, a lot of people aren't given the same privileges and the same opportunities as others.
Shelby says 100% of the YouTube ad revenue generated will be donated to help these affected populations.
Together, let none of us fall. We'll fight the long fight till all the wrongs right. The future as I.
So half of that ad revenue will be donated directly to the NAACP to help fight against racial injustice. And the other half of the ad revenue from this video will be donated to Americans for the Arts, which is an organization that is helping artists who have been out of work for months and are really struggling due to the coronavirus pandemic.
Shelby Rassler's initiative has offered hundreds of artists a way to use their talents to help others. It's also an easy way for people anywhere to support the cause, as all it takes to make a contribution is to watch and share the music video.
As our guiding light, we will rebuild.
Melissa Butts filing that report. Rebuild has already been viewed more than 2,400 times. And that is Currents News. I'm Emily Drewby. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.